Have you ever opened your own front door and felt like you'd just broken into a stranger's house? Not because you moved, not because you forgot where you live, but because someone, while you were gone, erased every trace that you'd ever been there. I used to think my worst fear was dying alone. Turns out there's something worse. Staying alive long enough to watch your own child strip your life bare and leave you sitting on the floor of an empty house built on 30 years of your sacrifice. I had just come home from the hospital. One stupid fall in the kitchen, one broken wrist, one night under fluorescent lights with nurses telling me I really needed to start being careful at my age. They sent me home with a plastic bag of pills and a warning about rugs and clutter. My son had shaken his head on the phone and said, "See, Mom, this is what I've been talking about. You can't keep living like that. Let us help you." Let us help you. Those words sound so kind until you find out what someone thinks help looks like. I turned my key in the lock, pushed the door open, and waited for the familiar little resistance when it bumped the edge of the old couch. It didn't come. The door swung wide. Light poured in, and my greeting was an echo. No soft thunk of the couch arm behind the door. No hum of the TV from the corner. No shape of the dining room table half visible through the living room archway. Just open space. Gaping, hollow. Wrong. My first thought was that I had the wrong house. I actually stepped back onto the porch and checked the numbers beside the door like some confused stranger. Same faded paint, same cracked top step, same worn welcome mat my sister bought me my first Christmas here. But inside, my life had vanished. I walked in slowly, the way you walk into a room you're not sure you're allowed to be in. The living room I'd fallen asleep in 1,000 times was bare. No couch, no coffee table with the water rings from all the nights I'd forgotten a coaster. The spot where my armchair used to be was a pale square on the carpet, a ghost of fabric the sun hadn't reached yet. "No," I heard myself say, my voice too small for the emptiness. "No, no, no, no." Have you ever stood in the middle of your own home and felt like the last piece of junk no one bothered to haul away? Every step I took echoed. My shoes clicked on floor where there should have been a rug. The walls looked naked without the pictures I'd spent years collecting, hanging, straightening. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was accusing. Could you forgive your child if you opened your front door and realized they'd sold your whole life while you were lying in a hospital bed? I went to the kitchen next on instinct. The table where we'd eaten every birthday dinner, every just us holiday when we couldn't afford to go anywhere. Gone. In its place, 4 faint circles on the worn linoleum where the legs had stood for 20 years. My mismatched chairs had vanished like they'd never existed. The cabinets hung a little open, lighter than they should have been. Inside, a few lonely mugs rattled in the corners. The good plates, the set I saved for and bought the year my son turned 10 because I wanted us to feel like a real family, were missing. My bedroom was stripped, the dresser I had since before he was born, the mirror we used when I adjusted his tiny tie for school pictures, the lamp I brought from my mother's house, gone. Someone had left my mattress on the floor like a mercy, sheets folded in a neat pile at the foot as if that made it dignified. There is a particular kind of humiliation in realizing someone looked at every single thing you own, put a price tag on it, and decided you wouldn't miss it enough to matter. I gripped the doorway to keep from sliding straight down onto the boards. For a second, I actually wondered if I'd had a stroke, if this was some strange hospital dream. Because surely no one who loved me would do this without asking, without talking, without warning. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my son. 3 hours earlier, while I'd been sitting in the discharge lounge waiting for my ride. Mom, don't freak out when you get home. We handled a lot of stuff for you. We'll explain everything later. Love you. Handled a lot. Like I was paperwork. He hadn't called. He hadn't asked. Just that one message as if he'd rearranged a few cupboards instead of gutting my house. Have you ever wondered quietly if your kids will still see you as a person once they have their own lives? Once there's a spouse in the picture, careers, vacations, dreams that don't include you? Or will you quietly turn into storage? An extra room, a bank account, a pile of stuff they'll clear out when it's convenient? My phone buzzed again, this time not a text, a social media notification. My son's name, that little glowing circle that means new story. My thumb hovered over it. I told myself not to look. I looked. The first clip, he was at the airport, his wife on his arm, new matching luggage stacked on a cart, her voice in the background, high and excited. We're really doing this. His caption, can't believe it's finally happening. New chapter. Next clip, clouds through a plane window, a selfie of them clinking plastic cups of soda over tray tables, little airplane emoji in the corner. Final clip, both of them standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, lights twinkling behind them, real champagne flutes in their hands. Her squealing, "We made it!" His caption this time, sometimes you have to let go of the past to live your dreams. The past. He meant my house, my furniture, my things, my life. Sometimes you have to let go of the past. Did that past get a say? Did it get a warning? Or did it just come home from a hospital bed with a sore wrist and a bag of prescriptions and find itself sitting on a bare mattress in the shell it had spent 30 years paying for? No, I said again, but this time my voice cracked. I sank down on the living room floor where my coffee table used to be, knees protesting, palms pressed to the cold, naked wood. The last time this room had been this empty was the day I moved in, with a borrowed futon, a secondhand TV, and a 3-year-old dragging a plastic toy hammer across the floor, helping me build our life. Back then, the emptiness had tasted like possibility, a blank canvas, a promise. This emptiness felt like an eviction, not by a landlord, but by my own child. What would you do, sitting there on that floor? Would you call the police? A lawyer? A friend? Would you scream? Or would you tell yourself, he didn't mean it like that. He thought he was helping. He's under a lot of stress. My whole life, I had been afraid of ending up in an empty home. The quiet kind, where no one calls, no one visits, no one asks what's for dinner. I never imagined I'd get there, not because everyone drifted away, but because my own son had cleaned me out like a storage unit and left me behind. But here's what he didn't understand when he emptied those rooms. He didn't just take my furniture. He took away the illusion I'd been living under for years, that as long as I kept giving, he'd keep seeing me. He thought he'd left me with nothing but a bare mattress and four walls. He had no idea what I was about to take away from him in return.
I don't know how long I sat on that living room floor before my fingers finally remembered what they were for and found my son's name in my phone. His Paris story was still open on the screen when I flicked it away and hit call. My thumb hovered over the red button, a part of me still ready to hang up, to go back to pretending this was some giant mistake. But the ring started before I could change my mind. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, he picked up. "Hey, Mom," he shouted over a roar of noise, laughter, clinking glasses, some kind of music in the background. "Can I call you back? We're kind of in the middle of something." "No," I said. My voice came out flatter than I felt. "You can't." There was a pause. "What's wrong?" he asked, but not the way you ask when you're really afraid. More like the way you ask when you're annoyed the universe has interrupted your fun. "I'm home," I said. "From the hospital." "Yeah, I saw they discharged you today," he said. "That's great, Mom. See? You're tougher than—" "The house is empty," I cut in. He laughed, that quick, nervous laugh he'd had since he was a teenager. "Well, not empty, Mom. There is nothing here," I said slowly, each word scraping my throat. "The couch is gone. The table is gone. The chairs, the cabinet, the armchair, the TV, the curtains, everything. I am sitting on the floor in the living room right now because there is nowhere else to sit." Another pause, a longer one this time. The background noise dimmed, like he'd stepped away from the crowd. "Okay, you're freaking out," he said finally. "We talked about this. We said we were going to clear things out. You've been saying for years you needed to declutter." "A few things," I said. "Not the entire house. It's just furniture, Mom." And there was that tone, half exasperation, half condescension. "You're acting like we sold a kidney. You still have the house. We just made it safer, less cluttered." "Safer," I repeated. "You think it's safer for an old woman to sleep on a mattress on the floor with no table, no chair, no place to put a lamp? Is that what safety looks like to you?" I heard his wife's voice faintly in the background. "Is that your mom? What's she saying?" There was muffled movement, then her clearer, closer. "Hi, Mom. We were going to call you later to explain. We didn't want to stress you while you were still at the hospital." My jaw clenched. "Explain what?" I asked. "That you cleared out my house using my key while I was lying in a bed I didn't know if I'd get to leave? That you sold my furniture to strangers? That I had to find out where you are from your vacation videos?" Silence. Then my son, bristling. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It isn't." "We did this for you," his wife cut in. "We've been telling you it's dangerous to have so much stuff around. You fell. You broke your wrist. We're just trying to make sure you don't break your hip next time." "And the trip?" I asked. My hand shook, but my voice didn't. Another tiny sliver of silence, just large enough for the truth to slip through. "We had some money saved already. my son said quickly. The stuff we sold just helped. And like I said, it helped you too. Win-win. How much? I asked. What? How much did you get for my things? My table, my mother's cabinet, the couch, the chairs, the armchair your father used to sleep in, the bookshelf you built me. How much were they worth to you? I don't know off the top of my head, he snapped. We didn't write it all down. It wasn't that much anyway. Most of it was old. People were doing us a favor taking it. Funny, I said. I thought the favor was you helping me. Turns out I was funding your dream trip. His patience snapped. You know what? I'm not going to stand here in the middle of Paris arguing about secondhand junk. You're overreacting. You always do this. Turn everything into some big betrayal. We cleaned your house. We helped you. You should be saying thank you. I actually laughed, then, a short, cracked sound. Thank you, I repeated. For what? For making sure when I fell again there'd be nothing soft to land on? You're being dramatic, she said. You said yourself you were worried about money. Now you have extra cash. We left some in the envelope on the counter. I looked over. There it was, a plain white envelope on the bare kitchen counter, like a tip left for a hotel maid. I crossed the empty room, tore it open. A few $100, maybe enough for a cheap chair and a thrift store table if I was lucky. This, I said, holding it even though they couldn't see me, does not buy back 30 years. It's more than you had yesterday. And it's not like we took everything. You still have your bed. Without a frame. On the floor. Like I moved in yesterday. Do you remember what you said to me back then when we first brought the futon in? You asked me if they could make us leave. I told you no. I lied. Oh, come on, he groaned. Don't start with the guilt trip. You always do this when I try to fix things. You cling to the past, to stuff, and then I'm the bad guy for trying to move you forward. Move me forward to what? To being easier to clear out when I die? He didn't answer that. Look, she said, bright and brittle, we're sorry you're upset. That was never the goal. We thought you'd be happy to have less to worry about. We'll help you buy some new things when we're back. Something lighter, more modern. This is just step one. Step one of what? Removing me from my own life? He heard him swear under his breath. You know what? He said. I'm not doing this right now. I'm on vacation. We saved for this. We earned it. You always said I wanted me to have a better life than you did. Well, this is part of that. Experiences, travel, not being stuck in the same old house forever. That house, I said slowly, is the only reason you had a stable childhood at all. Every night I spent on my feet, every double shift, every late fee. Do you think I did that for the furniture? I did it so you'd have a place no one could make you leave. And now you have it, he snapped. You still own the place. You're welcome. That did it. Something in me snapped, so cleanly I could almost hear it. I've just found mine. It wasn't at the first sold table or the missing armchair or even the jokes about me being a sentimental hoarder. It was here, alone in an empty house, funded by my pain, listening to my son tell me I should be grateful he had fixed my life so he could go live his. You can't get your furniture back once it's gone. Not all of it. Not the way it was, but there are other things you can take away. Access, assumptions, entitlements.
The next morning, before I even thought about shopping for a replacement chair, I called a locksmith. And then I called my lawyer.
The days after that conversation felt strange. Quiet, but not the hollow, echoing kind from before. More like the quiet after you finally turn off a machine that's been humming in the background so long you forgot it was there. I half expected my phone to light up with messages from him. Long paragraphs, maybe. Accusations, explanations, something. Instead, there was almost nothing. A few hours after he left, he sent one text. "I can't believe you do this to your own son." I stared at it for a long time. The old May would have written an essay back, defending myself, twisting in circles to make him feel better, offering compromises I didn't really want. For once, I didn't respond. At first, that silence felt like a stone in my chest. I'd pick up my phone and put it back down 4, 5 times a day. I'd imagine him telling people his version, painting me as the cruel mother who cut him out over a couch. I wanted to correct every imagined conversation, defend myself to every invisible jury. But the thing about not answering is, after a while, the urge passes. You realize the world doesn't actually end when you don't explain yourself to someone who's already decided you're wrong. Meanwhile, life had to go on. I still had a wrist that ached when it rained. I still needed a place to sit that wasn't the floor. I still needed to eat. I started small. A neighbor down the street heard about my fall and my empty house. She showed up one afternoon with a folding chair and a pot of soup. "You don't have to sit on the floor," she said simply, setting the chair in the living room, "and you don't have to do this alone." The folding chair wasn't pretty. It clashed with the curtains I'd finally hung, but it was offered, not taken. That made it beautiful to me. I went back to the same secondhand stores where I'd once hunted for anything cheap enough to fill a space. This time, I wasn't trying to make the house look like anyone else's idea of enough. I bought one armchair because it fit my back just right, not because it matched a set, a small round dining table that left room to walk, 2 sturdy chairs, one for me, one for whoever chose to sit across from me willingly. I found a little bookcase and rebuilt my library slowly, picking only the books I actually loved, instead of all the ones I thought I should keep. A neighbor's teenage son helped me mount a couple of shelves on the wall so nothing heavy can fall on you if the ground shakes. He said I paid him with cash and a plate of brownies, and we both felt like we'd gotten the better end of the deal. The house stopped looking like a museum of my past and started looking like a place an actual person lived. Not the same fullness as before, but not a shell either. I'd thought I'd miss the old furniture more. And some of it I did. I never stopped mourning my mother's cabinet or the lopsided bookshelf my son had built me in high school. But what I missed most wasn't the things. It was the version of my son who would have known better than to sell them. My sister came by more often after that. She'd bring over a casserole and stories from her grandkids. "You could move in with us, you know," she said one evening, "if you ever don't want to be here alone." "I'm not ready to give this place up," I said, running my hand along the edge of my new little table. "I didn't say give it up. Just, you have options, Beck. You're not trapped." I realized that was part of what had scared me so much. For years, I'd secretly believed that if my son didn't take care of me one day, no one would. That I'd die in this house and no one would know until the mail piled up too high. Changing the locks in the will hadn't just closed a door on him.
It had forced me to open my eyes to all the other doors I'd ignored. I started going to the senior center down the street once a week. At first, I went for the free coffee on the distraction. Then I stayed for the women around the table who told stories that sounded a lot like mine, about ex-husbands who vanished, kids who moved far away, houses that were too big and too small at the same time. One of them, Gloria, laughed so hard telling a story about falling asleep in her recliner that she nearly tipped it over. "If my son ever sold this chair," she patted its arm, "I'd hound him." We all laughed. I told them, "Mine didn't wait for me to die to start the estate sale." When I got to the part about Paris, the whole table went silent. "So what should do?" one of them asked. "Changed the locks," I said. "Changed my will. Changed who I think I can count on." Gloria raised her paper cup toward me. "To learning the hard way," she said. I clinked mine against hers. "To stopping the lesson where you can," I replied. Every so often, a notification from my son would still pop up. A holiday text. "Merry Christmas." No invitation attached. No, "Can I come by?" Just 2 words and a tree emoji. Once, he sent a photo from some local festival, him and his wife smiling in front of a food truck. He wrote, "Thought you might like this one." I'd look at the screen, thumb hovering, and answer in the simplest way I knew how. "Merry Christmas." Looks fun. Nothing more, nothing less. He never mentioned the will again. I know he knows. My sister told me about the late-night call where he ranted, voice thick with anger and self-pity. "She's giving the house to strangers," he had said, "after everything I did for her." My sister, to her credit, had replied, "After everything she did for you, you sold her couch for a plane ticket." We didn't talk about that call, she and I. She just hugged me a little longer the next time I saw her. Sometimes I'd catch myself standing in the doorway between the hall and the living room, looking at the way the light hit my new chair, the small table, the less crowded walls. I'd remember the house when it was crammed with every bargain piece I could afford, then emptied without my say, then rebuilt little by my own hands. Too empty used to be my nightmare. Too full used to be my shield. Somewhere between the two, I'd found a size of life that felt like it was actually mine. I'd be lying if I never missed the days when my son's key worked in my lock and he walked in shouting, "Mom!" without a second thought. I missed the boy who used to drag a blanket into the living room and fall asleep with his head in my lap while the TV flickered. I don't miss the man who saw my home as a bank account with a roof. What I know now is this. I can't make him be one and not the other. I can only decide which version I open my door for. As for the future he warned me about, that day when I might be old and need someone to take care of me, I've stopped pretending I know exactly how it will look. Maybe I'll lean more on my sister. Maybe I'll move into a smaller place run by that very nonprofit I just put in my will. Maybe I'll be one of those old women at the senior center griping on the coffee and flirting with the volunteer who teaches chair yoga. What I won't do is live the rest of my life acting like my only choices are being someone's burden or being their storage unit. My son sold all my furniture and left me in an empty house. I couldn't stop that, but I did get to decide what stayed empty after that. And I decided it wouldn't be me.
When I fell in that kitchen, I thought the worst thing I'd bring home from the hospital was a cast on my wrist. I didn't realize I'd also handed my son the perfect excuse to do what he'd been wanting to do for months, clear my life out of my own house. The fall itself was stupid. No dramatic trip over mountains of clutter, no disaster. Just a slick spot on the linoleum, a bowl slipping from my good hand, my foot skidding one way while the rest of me went the other. The crack of bone-meetin' floor, the bright flash of pain, the world shrinking down to the inside of my own head. "You're lucky," the doctor said later, tight smile, eyes already on the next chart. "Could have been your hip. At your age, that's a whole different story." At your age. Funny how 3 little words can make you feel like an object more than a person. The nurse gave me a pamphlet on fall prevention for seniors and circled half of it. "Rugs, low furniture, clutter," she said. "You'll want to get rid of as much as you can. Do you have family who can help?" I thought of my son, of his wife's Pinterest boards of airy white rooms, of all the videos he'd been sending me about aging in place safely. "Yes," I said, "I do." He showed up that evening, his wife trailing behind him with a tote bag full of helpful things, non-slip socks, a grabber tool, a list she'd printed of home safety must-dos for Mom. He stood at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed, looking down at me like I was a case study proving his point. "This is exactly what we've been worried about," he said. Not, "I'm glad you're okay," not, "You scared me." Just that, confirmation bias. You could have really hurt yourself. "I did really hurt myself," I said, lifting my bandaged wrist. He ignored the joke. "We can't keep putting this off," his wife chimed in, patting my blanket like I was a restless dog. "You have too much stuff in that house. It's not safe. You heard the nurse." "We'll help you, Mom," he said. "Just let us get in there for a few days. We'll clear pathways, get rid of the heavy stuff, maybe sell a few things. You'll come home to a fresh start." A fresh start. It sounded so reasonable on that white hospital bed, with machines beeping and my hand throbbing, and the memory of the floor rushing up at me, still fresh behind my eyes. I was tired. Tired of hurting, tired of worrying, tired of being the one who had to think about everything. "I don't want to come home to an empty box," I said quietly. He rolled his eyes, a flash of the teenager who used to huff when I asked him to take the trash out. "No one's emptying your house, Mom. We're not monsters. We're just gonna make it safer. You said you were overwhelmed." Had I? Maybe I had, on one of those nights when the bills piled up and my joints ached and the dustin' felt like it never ended. Maybe I'd sighed and said, "This is all too much." I hadn't meant, "Please treat my life like a clearance sale." But it's amazing how fast "I'm tired" can turn into permission in someone else's head. "We'll be careful," his wife promised. "We'll leave the important things. We just need you to trust us." That word again. Trust. I'd been trusting him since he was born, trusting that he'd eat what I could afford, sleep when I could finally lie down, be okay when I left him with neighbors or daycare so I could work. Trusting that one day when he said, "I'll take care of ya," he meant more than sending me links about grab bars. I looked at my wrist, at the bruises blooming up my arm. I thought about how hard it had been to get out of bed that morning, even before I hit the floor. I thought about the doctor's "at your age," the nurse's circled pamphlet. "All right," I said, the words tasting like defeat and relief at the same time. "You can tidy up a bit while I'm here. Just don't throw anything out without telling me."
"Of course," he said, too quickly. "We'll call you. We'll send pictures. You'll approve everything." I wanted to believe him, so I did. The next morning, they took me for x-rays and then parked me in a shared room with a woman who snored like a chainsaw. When I woke from a painkiller nap, my phone showed a missed call from my sister, a weather alert, and a text from my son. "Headin' to your place now to start on the living room. It's gonna look so much better, Mom. Don't worry." Don't worry. The favorite phrase of people about to do exactly what you're worried about. A few towns over, while I lay staring at water stains on hospital ceiling tiles, my son unlocked my front door with the key I'd given him for emergencies. He walked into our living room and didn't see the spot where he'd taken his first steps, wobbling from the couch to my outstretched hands. He didn't see the place where he'd slept on the floor during a storm because the thunder scared him and he said the carpet felt safer. He saw inventory. "The couch has got to go," his wife said, snapping photos with her phone. "It's huge and old, and it smells like memories." She meant old. Poor. "We can get at least a couple hundred for it if we price it low and say vintage." "Your mom's table is actually solid wood," she added, running a manicured hand along its edge. "People eat that farmhouse look up, slap antique in the listing, and bump the price." He laughed. "My grandma donated this to us. I can't believe people would pay for it." But he took the pictures anyway. The bookshelf he'd built me in high school, crooked shelves and all. "DIY rustic," his wife said. "Someone will love it." The cabinet with my mother's china? "We'll wrap the dishes and sell them separately. More money that way." They moved through the house like that, item by item, memory by memory, speaking a language of resale value and floor space. "We're doing her a favor," he said once, when his wife hesitated over a lamp. "She's been saying she can't keep up. This'll give her some cash and less to trip over." "And us a little boost," she said, checking flight prices on her phone between listings. "If we can get another 1,000 or so, we could actually book before prices go up." He hesitated for half a second. "She'll be fine," he said, more to himself than to her. "It's just stuff. She should be enjoying life, not dusting knickknacks. Paris is once in a lifetime." Paris was his once in a lifetime. My once in a lifetime had been signing mortgage papers in a cheap blazer and holding a key that meant I wouldn't have to move again because a landlord said so. They hauled my couch out the front door, cushions askew, leaving a darker rectangle on the carpet. The table followed, the chairs, the side tables. Buyers came and went, handing over crumpled bills and tapping on phone screens to send transfers. My son folded the money, stuffed it into an envelope, peeling off some for gas and time without thinking too hard about it. In my bedroom, they stripped my dresser bare, sliding my clothes into boxes and stacking them in the corner. "We'll get her something lighter," his wife said, photographing the drawers. "This thing's a beast. Someone will flip it and make it cute." The armchair where his father had once sat holding him as a baby went out next. He didn't pause when it left. Maybe he didn't remember. Maybe that was easier. "Should we leave anything?" his wife asked at one point, standing in the echoing living room, hair sticking to her forehead with sweat. "The bed," he said. "We can't have her coming home from the hospital with no bed. We're not animals." They left the mattress on the floor because it was too much hassle to haul the frame. The lamp went, the nightstand went. The framed photos from the hallway were stacked in a box to go through later.
Each decision, on its own, could have been argued as practical, sensible even. The rugs really were trip hazards. The old couch really was hard to get out of with a bad back. The table really did eat up half the room. But taken together, in those few days while I lay on stiff hospital sheets, they did something much bigger than declutter. They erased the physical proof that I had built a life in that house at all. They finished loading the last pieces into a buyer's truck the day before my discharge. By then, his flight alerts were buzzing nonstop on his phone. They dropped another 100, his wife said, eyes bright as a kid on Christmas. If we book tonight, we can still make it this month. He looked around my hollowed-out home. For a moment, just a second, maybe he saw what he'd done. The empty walls, the pale squares on the carpet, the envelope of cash on the counter like an apology. "She's going to freak," his wife said quietly. "She'll adjust," he replied. "She always does. And hey, we left her the bed." He locked the door behind him on the way out, the old key turning easily in the lock I still thought kept me safe. That night, while I packed my plastic bag of hospital belongings and signed discharge papers with my clumsy left hand, he and his wife sat at her laptop, entering card numbers into a booking site. A confirmation email pinged. Flight to Paris, paid in full. "We did it!" she squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. "We're really going." "Told you we'd find a way," he said, grinning, tapping the envelope of cash on the kitchen counter at their place. "Sometimes you just have to be ruthless about letting go." Letting go. That's what he called it. In his mind, he wasn't robbing me. He was streamlining, upgrading, chasing his dreams. In mine, I was still lying on a narrow hospital bed, tracing cracks in the ceiling and telling myself that trust meant giving your kid a key and taking their word when they said, "We'll help." The day I came home and opened my front door, I thought that moment, seeing the empty rooms, was when everything changed. The truth is, the turning point had already happened. It happened the second I agreed, in that hospital bed, to let someone who saw my life as clutter decide what was worth keeping.
A few hours after I sat on that floor and told my son there would be consequences, a white van pulled up outside my house, and a man in a worn work jacket climbed out with a toolbox. "You the one who called about rekeying?" he asked. I nodded and let him into the echo. His boots rang louder on my bare floors than they should have. He glanced around once, taking in the emptiness, the pale marks on the carpet, the mattress on the floor, the blank spaces on the walls, but he didn't comment. Maybe he'd seen worse. Maybe he hadn't. I held out the small ring of keys that had opened my life for years. He studied the one to the front door. "You want me to match the new lock to this, or—" "No," I said. "I want that one to stop working. Completely." He blinked, then shrugged. "You got it." He unscrewed the old deadbolt while I watched, metal scraping metal, little pieces clinking into his palm. It felt indecent somehow, seeing the insides of the lock that had let my son in and out without knocking for so long. How many times had that key turned right before he yelled, "Mom, you home?" Once that sound meant comfort. Lately, it had started to sound more like a warning. When he finished, he clicked the new lock into place and handed me 2 shiny keys. "Anyone else need one?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just me." He hesitated. "If you change your mind, duplicates are cheap." "So is trust, apparently," I muttered, mostly to myself. He gave me a look. The The kind people give when they don't really want the story they've just been offered. "Take care of yourself, ma'am," he said, and left. Me, myself, and a new luck. It wasn't revenge. It was a line. The next call was harder, not because of who I was calling, but because of what it meant. I sat at my bare kitchen counter, the envelope of extra cash my son had left for me pushed to one side like trash. My wrist ached in its brace as I scrolled through contacts until I found a name I hadn't used in years, the lawyer who'd helped me buy this house. "Blake and Associates?" a woman's voice answered, crisp but not unkind. "Hi, this is Rebecca Shaw. You helped me with my mortgage a long time ago. I need to talk about changing my will." There was a short pause and the soft clatter of keys. "Yes, Miss Shaw, I see you here. What's happened?" I looked around my hollow kitchen. My son just sold almost everything in my house while I was in the hospital, without my permission. Used the money to go on vacation. A quiet exhale. "I'm sorry," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. "We can certainly review your documents. Have you considered any legal action regarding the items?" "You mean suing him?" The word felt wrong in my mouth. No, I don't want to drag my only child into court over a couch. I can't leave things the way they are. I can't leave everything to someone who looks at my life and sees inventory. "Understood. When's the last time you updated your will?" "When he went to college," I said. "Back then it was simple. Everything goes to my son." "Does that still reflect what you want?" I thought about 30 years of rent receipts, overtime pay, layaway plans. I thought about my son's caption from Paris, "Sometimes you have to let go of the past to live your dreams." "No," I said. "It doesn't." "All right," she said. "Let's change it." A few days later, I sat in her office under lights that buzzed softly, the walls lined with degrees and framed photos of ribbon cuttings. She slid my old will across the table, the one I barely remember signing. "You named your son as sole beneficiary, house, savings, personal property. You also named him as executor. That gives him full authority over your estate when you pass." He already acted like he had that authority now. I don't want that anymore. Not the sole part, not the full authority part. We can appoint someone else as executor, a sibling, a trusted friend. "My sister," I said, without hesitating. "Lisa. She's sensible." She made a note. "And as for your assets, particularly the house, what would you like to see happen?" I hesitated. For so long, I'd told myself the point of all this, the work, the mortgage, the scraped-together furniture, was to hand him something better than I'd had. Hand. As if my only function in his story was to pass him a baton and disappear. I want to stay in it as long as I can, but when I'm gone, I don't want it treated like a flip project. I want it to matter to somebody the way it mattered to me. I thought of the women from the senior center, the grocery clerks with aching feet, the neighbor who drove me home from the hospital. Is there a way to leave it to a program for women like I used to be? Single, older, praying somebody would give them a chance at a real home? She nodded. "There are local nonprofits that work with older women and housing. We can designate one as the beneficiary of the property." "Do that," I said. The words came out steadier than I felt. "They can figure out who needs it when I'm not here to argue." "Your savings?" she asked gently. It wasn't a fortune, not by the world's standards, but every dollar had been wrestled from long hours and sore muscles. I said, "Split it. Some to that same fund, some to my sister, for all the times she's helped me out. A set amount to my son. Enough that I'm not pretending he doesn't exist, not so much that he can keep thinking my life is his exit plan." She nodded again. "We can also include a clause that discourages him from contesting it.
If he challenges the will in court, his share would be reduced to a nominal amount. That way, there's no incentive to fight your wishes. Yes, I said. If he tries to fight for more, he gets less. It felt brutal, writing my child out of the future I'd always imagined for him. It also felt, for the first time in a long time, like I was imagining a future for myself that wasn't just an afterthought. She slid the new draft toward me. This reflects what we discussed. Read through, and if you're comfortable, sign at the flags. We'll witness and notarize. I read every line, MIPS moving silently. The house to a housing fund, the savings divided. My sister in charge. My son's name still there, but smaller now, in proportion to how much of me he'd actually seen lately. This was not punishment from beyond the grave. It was correction, a course change. This feels harsh, I admitted, pen hovering, like I'm slamming a door that I can't open again later. You can always revise it again while you're alive, she reminded me. Nothing here is carved in stone. This just makes sure that if something unexpected happened tomorrow, your estate would speak for you more honestly than your old document did. Honestly, that was the word. I signed. My name looked smaller than it used to, but my hand, even with the brace, didn't shake as much as I expected. It was almost 2 weeks before my son came back from Paris. I knew he was home before he told me. A friend of his posted a picture on social media. Him and his wife at the airport, bleary-eyed and smiling, neck pillows hanging around their shoulders, duty-free bags at their feet. The caption, "Back from living their best life." I waited. I didn't call. I didn't text. I watered my plants. I got used to my new armchair. I learned which parts of the day the light came in just right to make the little kitchen table glow. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. A message from him. "Hey, we're back. How's the wrist? I'll swing by later with your souvenir." No, "is now a good time?" No, "can I come over?" Just the assumption that he'd walk straight in like always. "Okay," I wrote back. "Ring the bell when you get here." His reply was instant. "LOL, I have a key, Mom. Don't worry about getting up." Your key won't work anymore. Ring the bell. The typing dots popped up, disappeared, popped up again. "What? Did you change the locks?" "Yes," I wrote. "We'll talk." 15 minutes later, my new doorbell, a sound I was still getting used to, rang 3 hard times in a row. I took a breath and opened the door. He stood on the porch in a leather jacket he hadn't owned when he left, a scarf knotted just so around his neck. His wife hovered behind him, sunglasses pushed into her hair, a glossy shopping bag dangling from her wrist. He held up his old key like a piece of damning evidence. "What the hell, Mom? You actually changed the locks?" "I did," I said. "Come in. We need to talk." I stepped aside. He came in, stuttered a little when he saw the living room. It was no longer gutted, but it wasn't what it had been either. A single, comfortable armchair in place of the old sofa, a small bookcase with a few chosen titles, lighter curtains I'd picked because I liked them, not because they matched anything. "Wow, you really went all in on the minimalist thing, huh?" His wife laughed, brittle. "See, it feels so much more open. You can breathe." "I could breathe before," I said.
Sit down. I led them to the little round table in the kitchen, the one I'd bought with my own money from the thrift store. It only had 2 chairs. I sat in one and pointed to the other. He took it. His wife leaned against the counter, arms folded. "So," he said, drumming his fingers, "about the other day, you kinda lost it over the phone." "Did I?" I asked. Because I remember coming home from surgery to find my house emptied and my son in another country telling me I should say thank you. He rolled his eyes.
We've been over this. We were helping you. You said you were overwhelmed. You fell. The nurse talked about clutter. I said I was tired. I said I was scared of falling again. I did not say, use my key to gut my house and cash it in for airline miles. His wife straightened. Okay, that's unfair, she said. We spent days cleaning, listing, hauling. We didn't charge you for any of that. We left you money. We were trying to give you a fresh start. A fresh start for who? I asked. You flew to Paris. I slept on a mattress on the floor. He sighed like I was a child who wouldn't understand her own good fortune. He told you we'll help you buy new stuff, he said. Lighter pieces, safer. You can't honestly tell me you'd rather trip over that old coffee table than get something that doesn't break your shins. You know what I'd rather? I'd rather my son not treat my home like a showroom he gets to redesign for content. I'd rather not watch you drink champagne over the Eiffel Tower with money from my living room. He looked away then, jaw tense. So what now? You changed the locks, what, to punish me? No, I said. I changed the locks because you proved you don't respect my door. You don't get to have a key to a place you see as inventory. From now on, you come here when I invite you, not to fix things, not to move anything, to visit. Or you don't come at all. He stared at me like I'd suggested we never speak again. I'm your son, he said. I shouldn't need an invitation to my own childhood home. That's exactly the problem. You think this is your house. It's not. You have your own. This, I gestured around, is mine. This is my life, not your project. Silence settled for a beat. His wife shifted against the counter, annoyed. You told me you called a lawyer, he said, finally, eyes narrowing. What did you do? I met his gaze. My heart hammered, but my voice stayed even. I changed my will. He flinched, just a flicker. What does that mean? It means you are no longer the one in charge when I die. Your aunt is executor now. This house goes to a housing fund for older single women who need a place, not to someone who's already proven he sees it as a payout. My savings get split between that fund and your aunt. You still get something, but not everything. And if you try to fight it, you get even less. His face went red, then white. You're insane, he burst out. Over some furniture? You're gonna cut your own son out over a couch and a table? No, I said. I'm doing it over what selling them without asking told me. You sold off 30 years of my life for a week in Paris. I'm not going to reward that with a house. You've always cared more about everyone else than me. Strangers, charity cases. Now you'd rather give them your home than your own child. Those strangers, I said quietly, are women like I used to be, like some of your friends' moms still are. They're the ones who work 2 jobs so their kids don't have to sleep on couches that smell like someone else's life. If I can make it easier for even one of them, I will. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I love myself enough not to pretend this was okay. His wife stepped in, frustrated. He's helped you a lot, she said, driving you places, fixing things, trying to make sure you're safe. And this is how you thank him? I almost laughed. When I fell, a neighbor took me to the ER. The nurses helped me to the bathroom. The night aide sat with me when I couldn't sleep. When I came home to nothing, the locksmith changed my locks. The lawyer listened to me cry in her office and didn't charge me for the extra time. Your husband? He sold my furniture and told me not to do anything stupid with my will. Don't tell me he's always there. I have eyes. He looked like he'd been slapped. So that's it? You're just done with me? Every part of me that ever rocked him to sleep wanted to say no, to rush around the table, grab his hands and say, I didn't mean it, I'll change it back, just don't walk out. I didn't. Instead, I said, no. I am done pretending what you did was a small thing. I am done giving you unlimited access to my home and my future. But I am not done being your mother. You want a relationship that isn't built on what you can take? I'll be here. You want keys and control and an inheritance you haven't earned? That door is closed. His eyes shone, whether with anger, hurt, or both. I couldn't tell. You're punishing me, he whispered. Consequences aren't punishment. They're the bill coming due. He stood up so fast his chair scraped. You know what? Keep it. Give your house to strangers. Give your money away. When you're old and you need someone to take care of you, don't call me. That should have gutted me. A year ago, it would have. But I thought of the hospital, the empty house, the locksmith van pulling away. I thought about who had actually shown up when I needed help and who had shown up only when there was something to gain. I already didn't. And I survived. For a second, I saw the little boy he used to be flicker across his face, the one who'd once clung to my leg and begged me not to leave him at preschool. Then his jaw tightened, he grabbed his wife's hand, and they walked out. The new lock slid quietly into place when I turned it behind them. The house was silent again, but for the first time since I moved in all those years ago, the quiet didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a line I'd finally drawn.
When they left, I stood in the middle of my kitchen and listened to the quiet. It wasn't the same silence I'd come home to after the hospital. That one had felt like a verdict, proof that I'd been stripped, that I'd somehow failed so badly my own child saw my life as clutter. This silence felt raw, but it was mine. I half expected that first night to break down, to call him back, to beg, to say, forget the will, forget the locks, come over, we'll work it out. The old script ran in loops in my head. Fix it, smooth it over, make yourself smaller so he doesn't feel so wrong. The phone stayed dark. I slept on my mattress on the floor one more night, out of habit as much as anything. In the morning, my back ached and my wrist throbbed, but something else hurt less. The part of me that had been twisting into knots for days trying to pretend that this was normal had finally stopped contorting. The first small kindness came from someone who owed me nothing. My neighbor Rosa knocked on the door with a pot of soup and a folding chair. She said, I heard about your fall and about the house. She glanced around the bare living room, but she didn't stare. She just unfolded the chair and set it up by the window. She said, you don't have to sit on the floor, and you don't have to sit here alone. We ate soup at my little kitchen table, the one I'd found for cheap at a thrift store the week after I changed the will. It wobbled a bit, and one of the chairs squeaked, but it had been my choice to bring it home. That mattered more than how it looked. You could come stay with us for a while, Rosa offered between spoonfuls. My daughter's room is empty since she moved out, at least until you get things sorted. For a moment, the idea tempted me. A house full of noise instead of echoes. People bumping into me because there were too many of us, not because there was too much stuff. But when I looked around my stripped-down rooms, I realized I didn't want to abandon them. Not yet. I'd fought too hard for this roof to give it up the second it wasn't full. Thank you, I told her, but
I think I need to see what my life looks like here first, without, I gestured to the empty spaces, without all of that, without all of them. She nodded like she understood more than I was saying. Slowly, piece by piece, I began to put my house back together, but not the way it had been before. I didn't try to recreate every lost item. Some things were gone forever. My mother's glass cabinet, the heavy dining table, the armchair with the worn patch where my son's head used to rest when he was small. Trying to replace them would have felt like putting someone else's costume on instead of getting dressed myself. I bought a single, sturdy armchair that didn't smell like anyone's memories. A small round table that left room for my older hips to move around it. 2 chairs, not 6. A couple of shelves bolted safely to the wall, holding only the books I actually reread, not the ones I kept because I felt like I should. The walls stayed blank for a while. Then one afternoon, I took a shock box from the closet, photos I'd grabbed before they could sell the frames, and chose 3. One of me and my sister on the day I got the keys to the house, cheeks wet, paper contract in my hand. One of my son at 5, grinning, flour on his face from helping me bake a lopsided birthday cake. And one of just me, much younger, standing in a grocery store uniform, exhausted, but smiling at a coworker who'd snapped the picture. I had them copied and put in plain, cheap frames. Not the original ornate ones they'd taken. Just simple rectangles of glass and metal. I hung them in the hallway. "These are the ones I'm keeping," I said out loud to no one. It felt like a promise to myself, not a warning to anyone else. My sister came by more often after that. She'd bring over leftovers and gossip from her grandkids. She said, "You know, it's starting to look like you live here again." I said, "I never stopped. I just got crowded out for a while." At the senior center down the street, I found a table of women who knew exactly what that felt like. Widows, divorcees, women whose kids had moved across the country and called twice a year. They played cards and told stories in equal measure. One day, after we'd all swapped "my nephew thinks my house is his storage unit" complaints, I told them what had happened about the fall, the help, the furniture, the trip, the will. Gloria, a woman with bright lipstick and a louder laugh, slapped her cards down on the table. "If my son ever sold my recliner to buy plane tickets, I'd haunt him from the grave and rearrange his furniture every night." We all laughed. It felt good to laugh about it, even if the ache underneath was real. "What'd you do?" another woman asked me. "I changed my locks. I changed my well. I changed who I thought I could count on." Gloria raised her styrofoam cup in a toast. "To learnin' where the line is," she said. "And to drawin' it," I added. We clink cups. Weak coffee never tasted so strong. My son did text, eventually, a week after the confrontation. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own son." I looked at the words for a long time. The old guilt flared. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I was being cruel. Maybe this was all some horrible overreaction. But then I pictured my empty living room. The envelope on the counter, the Paris caption about letting go of the past. I pictured the nurse circling rugs, low furniture, clutter, and my son using that as a shopping list, not a caution. Sometimes the hardest part of setting a boundary isn't saying it. It's not apologizing for it afterward. I didn't answer that text. He sent shorter messages on holidays. "Merry Christmas. Happy birthday, Mom." Nothing more, nothing less. He didn't mention the will again. I heard through my sister that he'd ranted about it late one night, about strangers getting the house, about me choosing other people over him. She'd told him, be glad she still answered the phone. Some people would have changed the number, not just the locks. We didn't dissect that conversation, she and I, but the next time she came over, she squeezed my hand a little tighter than usual and said, "You know you're not crazy, right?" I said, "Some days I wondered." She said, "You're not. You just finally stopped pretending." Time didn't magically fix everything. There was no big movie-style reunion where my son showed up on my porch in the rain, apologizing in the exact words I'd always needed to hear. Mostly, there was a slow easing of the knot in my stomach when I saw his name on my phone. A shift from flinching to bracing. I don't know what our relationship will look like in 10 years. Maybe he'll come around. Maybe he won't. Maybe one day he'll knock on my door not because he wants anything, but because he's finally realized what he already had. What I do know is that for the first time since I moved into this house, I'm not living as if my entire worth is tied to what I leave him when I go. I look at my little living room now, the mismatched chair, the small table, the wall with 3 chosen photos, and I see a different story than the one I used to tell. Not, this is what I'll hand over one day, but this is what I built, and I get to enjoy it while I'm still here. The fear of ending up alone in an empty house used to keep me up at night. I realize what I was really afraid of wasn't the emptiness. It was never having the courage to fill it on my own terms.
For a long time, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me as a mother was hearing my son say, "I don't love you." I never considered there might be something quieter and crueler than that. Realizing he loved what I could give him more than he loved seeing me as a person. That's the part nobody warns you about when they tell stories about good mothers. They talk about sacrifice like it's a holy word. Work harder, give more, put yourself last. One day they say your kids will thank you. But they don't tell you there's a line where sacrifice stops being love and starts being self-erasure. They don't tell you that if you never show your children where that line is, they might grow up thinking it doesn't exist at all. When my son sold my furniture and called it helping, it would have been easy to make this story about stuff, about couches and cabinets and tables, about money and trips and who deserves what. But sitting on that bare floor, I understood none of this was really about wood and fabric. It was about what those things stood for to me. Years of getting up when I wanted to stay down. Every table I'd scrubbed, every chair I'd bought on layaway, every plate I'd stacked in a cabinet I was proud to own. He saw clutter and resale value. I saw proof that I had built a life that didn't vanish when a landlord raised the rent. And somewhere along the way, I had let him believe that proof was his to cash in whenever it suited him. Have you ever told yourself, it's just easier if I let it go? Easier to let them take the nicer chair. Easier to let them talk you into just a few pieces. Easier to say yes than to sit with the sharp, ugly feeling of saying no. That's how it happens. Not all at once, but in little trades. A boundary here, a piece of dignity there, a lifetime of, well, they meant well. If you're not careful, one day you come home and realize you've bartered away so many pieces of yourself that there's almost nothing standing in the middle of the room. And you can't even say you didn't see it coming, because if you're honest, you did. In every joke about when you go, in every comment about all this stuff to clear out, in every time you laughed along instead of saying, "This is mine. Ask before you touch it." We like to say family is everything, but here's something I had to learn the hard way. Family that only shows up when there's something to take
is not the same as family that shows up when there's nothing left but you. In the end, my son didn't teach me that lesson. My empty house did. I used to be terrified of that emptiness. I thought an empty room meant failure, loneliness, being forgotten. Now I know there's a difference between a house that's been emptied for you and a space you've cleared on purpose so you can breathe. A house stripped without your consent is violence. A room you choose to refill slowly with things and people that respect you is freedom. Changing the locks in my will didn't magically fix my relationship with my son. It didn't turn him into someone who suddenly understood 30 years of sacrifice overnight. It didn't turn me into some saint of boundaries. It just forced both of us to live without the lie we were used to, that my life and my home were some kind of joint account he automatically owned shares in. Have you ever told yourself, it's just easier if I let it go? Easier to let them take the nicer chair. Easier to talk you into just a few pieces. Easier to say yes than to sit with the sharp, ugly feeling of saying no. That's how it happens. Not all at once, but in little trades. A boundary here, a piece of dignity there, a lifetime of, well, they meant well. If you're not careful, one day you come home and realize you've bartered away so many pieces of yourself that there's almost nothing standing in the middle of the room. And you can't even say you didn't see it coming because, if you're honest, you did. In every joke about when you go, in every comments about all this stuff to clear out, in every time you laughed along instead of saying, this is mine, ask before you touch it. We like to say family is everything, but here's something I had to learn the hard way. Family that only shows up when there's something to take is not the same as family that shows up when there's nothing left but you. In the end, my son didn't teach me that lesson. My empty house did. I used to be terrified of that emptiness. I thought an empty room meant failure, loneliness, being forgotten. Now I know there's a difference between a house that's been emptied for you and a space you've cleared on purpose so you can breathe. A house stripped without your consent is violence. A room you choose to refill slowly with things and people that respect you is freedom. Changing the locks in my will didn't magically fix my relationship with my son. It didn't turn him into someone who suddenly understood 30 years of sacrifice overnight. It didn't turn me into some saint of boundaries. It just forced both of us to live without the lie we were used to, that my life and my home were some kind of joint account he automatically owned shares in. Have you ever felt more like storage than a parent? More like a safety net than a person? I'm not going to tell you the answer is to burn every bridge, but I will tell you this. You are allowed to close your door. You are allowed to say, this is mine. You are allowed to decide that the things you've worked for, whether that's a house, a chair that doesn't hurt your back, or just a quiet evening where no one is demanding anything, belong to you first and anyone else second. You are allowed to ask yourself, if I stopped having things for them to take, would they still come? And you're allowed to let that answer change how much access people get to you going forward. Boundaries don't mean you stop loving your children. They mean you stop loving them in ways that destroy you. Setting them didn't make me less of a mother. It made me finally remember I was also a woman who'd carried herself through more than anyone knew. A woman who'd earned the right to sit in her own chair, in her own house, behind her own lock, without feeling guilty about it. My son may never agree with what I did. He may never understand why the day he called my house the past was the day I stopped letting him own my future. But I understand it now. And I can live with a son who's angry at my boundaries a lot easier than I can live as a mother who has none. If that means my legacy isn't a house with his name on it, but a line that finally held, then that, to me, is still a life well spent.